intrinsic merit ought to make the only distinction amongst mankind. Johnson.
Why, sir, mankind have found that this cannot be. How shall we determine the proportion of intrinsic merit? Were that to be the only distinction amongst mankind, we should soon quarrel about the degree of it. Were all distinctions abolished, the strongest would not long acquiesce, but would endeavour to obtain a superiority by their bodily strength. But, sir, as subordination is very necessary for society, and contentions for superiority very dangerous, mankind, that is to say, all civilized nations, have settled it upon a plain invariable principle. A man is born to hereditary rank, or his being appointed to certain offices gives him a certain rank. Subordination tends greatly to human happiness. Were we all upon an equality, we should have no other enjoyment than mere animal pleasure.
I said, I considered distinction of rank to be of so much importance in civilized society, that if I were asked on the same day to dine with the first Duke in England, and with the first man in Britain for genius, I should hesitate which to prefer. Johnson.
To be sure, sir, if you were to dine only once, and it were never to be known where you dined, you would choose rather to dine with the first man of genius. But to gain most respect, you should dine with the first Duke in England, for 9 people in 10 that you meet with would have a higher opinion of you for having dined with a Duke, and the great genius himself would receive you better because you have been with the great Duke.
He took care to guard himself against any possible suspicion that his settled principles of reverence for rank and respect for wealth were at all owing to mean or interested motives, for he asserted his own independence as a literary man.
No man, said he, who ever lived by literature has lived more independently than I have done.
He said he had taken longer time than he needed to have done in composing his dictionary. He received our compliments upon that great work with complacency, and told us that the Academy della Crusca could scarcely believe that it was done by one man. Next morning I found him alone, and have preserved the following fragments of his conversation. Of a gentleman who was mentioned, he said, I have not met with any man for a long time who has given me such general displeasure. He is totally unfixed in his principles, and wants to puzzle other people. I said his principles had been poisoned by a noted infidel writer, but that he was nevertheless a benevolent, good man. Johnson.
We can have no dependence upon that instinctive, that constitutional goodness which is not founded upon principle. I grant you that such a man may be a very amiable member of society. I can conceive him placed in such a situation that he is not much tempted to deviate from what is right. And as every man prefers virtue, when there is not some strong incitement to transgress its precepts, I can conceive him doing nothing wrong. But if such a man stood in need of money, I should not like to trust him, and I should certainly not trust him with young ladies, for there is always temptation. Hume and other skeptical innovators are vain men, and will gratify themselves at any expense. Truth will not afford such food to their vanity, so they have betaken themselves to error. Truth, sir, is a cow which will yield such people no more milk, and so they are gone to milk the bull. If I could have allowed myself to gratify my vanity at the expense of truth, what fame might I have acquired? Everything which Hume has advanced against Christianity had passed through my mind long before he wrote. Always remember this, that after a system is well settled upon positive evidence, a few partial objections ought not to shake it. The human mind is so limited that it cannot take in all the parts of a subject, so that there may be objections raised against anything. There are objections against a plenum, and objections against a vacuum, yet one of them must certainly be true.
I mentioned Hume's arguments against the belief of miracles, that it is more probable that the witnesses to the truth of them are mistaken or speak falsely, than that the miracles should be true. Johnson.
Why, sir, the great difficulty of proving miracles should make us very cautious in believing them. But let us consider. Although God has made nature to operate by certain fixed laws, yet it is not unreasonable to think that he may suspend those laws, in order to establish a system highly advantageous to mankind. Now, the Christian religion is a most beneficial system, as it gives us light and certainty where we were before in darkness and doubt. The miracles which prove it are attested by men who had no interest in deceiving us, but who, on the contrary, were told that they should suffer persecution, and did actually lay down their lives in confirmation of the truth of the facts which they asserted. Indeed, for some centuries the heathens did not pretend to deny the miracles, but said they were performed by the aid of evil spirits. This is a circumstance of great weight. Then, sir, when we take the proofs derived from the prophecies, which have been so exactly fulfilled, we have most satisfactory evidence. Supposing a miracle possible, as to which, in my opinion, there can be no doubt, we have a strong evidence for the miracles in support of Christianity, as the nature of the thing admits.
At night Mr. Johnson and I supped in a private room at the Turk's Head Coffee House in the Strand.
I encourage this house, said he, for the mistress of it is a good civil woman, and has not much business. Sir, I love the acquaintance of young people, because in the first place, I don't like to think myself growing old. In the next place, young acquaintances must last longest, if they do last, and then, sir, young men have more virtue than old men. They have more generous sentiments in every respect. I love the young dogs of this age. They have more wit and humour and knowledge of life than we had. But then the dogs are not so good scholars. Sir, in my early years I read very hard. It is a sad reflection, but a true one, that I knew almost as much at 18 as I do now. My judgment, to be sure, was not so good, but I had all the facts. I remember very well, when I was at Oxford, an old gentleman said to me, "Young man, ply your books diligently now, and acquire a stock of knowledge, for when years come upon you, you will find that poring upon books will be but an irksome task."
This account of his reading, given by himself in plain words, sufficiently confirms what I have already advanced upon the disputed questions as to his application. It reconciles any seeming inconsistency in his way of talking upon it at different times, and shows that idleness and reading hard were with him relative terms, the import of which, as used by him, must be gathered from a comparison with what scholars of different degrees of ardour and assiduity have been known to do. And let it be remembered that he was now talking spontaneously and expressing his genuine sentiments, whereas at other times he might be induced from his spirit of contradiction, or more properly from his love of argumentative contest, to speak lightly of his own application to study. It is pleasing to consider that the old gentleman's gloomy prophecy as to the irksomeness of books to men of an advanced age, which is too often fulfilled, was so far from being verified in Johnson, that his ardour for literature never failed, and his last writings had more ease and vivacity than any of his earlier productions. He mentioned to me now, for the first time, that he had been distressed by melancholy, and for that reason he had been obliged to fly from study and meditation to the dissipating variety of life. Against melancholy he recommended constant